The vast reaches of the Pacific, with its numerous islands, have once again become a battlefield. Plying these waters are mighty aircraft carriers, motherships of foraging aircraft. From floating airfields such as these, Japanese naval aircraft take off for their missions of treachery and destruction. Two types of Jap biplanes, based on aircraft carriers, are the Fighter 95 and the Torpedo Bomber 96. These aircraft are conventional biplanes, resembling earlier American fighter models, and biplanes we now use for training purposes. The Japanese Fighter 95 is a single-place biplane with fixed landing gear and a radial air-cooled motor. It closely resembles our Boeing P-12, used by us in 1928. As the Jap Fighter 95 approaches, you see the unmistakable biplane pattern. The lower wing has a shorter span than the upper wing. The diameter of the motor cowling is very large. The diagonal wing bracings are near the wingtips. The fixed landing gear is readily apparent. From above, we note that the wings appear wide because they are staggered. The top wing extends forward of the bottom wing. The tail has a sharp taper on its leading edge and a straight trailing edge. If you are close enough, you will recognize the red ball, insignia of Japan. The short, wide nose and open cockpit are distinctive features. From the side, evident features are the staggered wings, the open cockpit, and the sharply angular tail. From below, the wings will again appear exceptionally wide because of the staggered design. The fixed landing gear is placed well forward. The five-sided tail looks roughly like a tent. The notch at the tip of the fuselage resembles the entrance to the tent. From this view, notice the complex bracing on wings and landing gear. The old-fashioned motor cowling is much larger than the fuselage. While our Navy is now concentrating on monoplane fighters, the Grumman F-3F, a fighter biplane, is still in active service. It is the American combat airplane most similar to the Japanese Navy Fighter 95. However, the Jap fighter can always be distinguished by its fixed landing gear and very large motor cowling. From above, the two aircraft look much the same, except that the Fighter 95 has an open cockpit and angular tail. From the side, the Jap 95 looks like an outdated fighter compared with our compact Grumman F-3F. The motor cowling on the Fighter 95 is larger than the Grumman. The The 95 also has fixed landing gear and an open cockpit. The F-3F has its wheels folded against the fuselage and an enclosed cockpit. The tail on the Jap fighter is decidedly angular when compared with the tail on our airplane. From below, the Jap 95's more angular tail sets it off from our F-3F. The Fighter 95 carries 3 synchronized guns, one .50 caliber mounted on the top of the fuselage, and 2 .30 caliber on the side. On each lower wing, 2 light bombs may be carried. For the protection of the pilot, the seat is armored. The Jap Fighter 95 is slower and has a lower ceiling than our Grumman F-3F. It also has a much slower rate of climb. This Navy Torpedo Bomber 96 is a 3-placed biplane with fixed landing gear and is powered by a radial air-cooled motor. The Torpedo Bomber 96 is much larger and more powerful than the Fighter 95. The wings of the Torpedo Bomber 96 are larger, of equal length, and without the dihedral of the 95. From the side, the nose of the Torpedo Bomber is slimmer and protrudes farther than the nose of the fighter. The fuselage is longer and has 3 crew positions. The major difference in tail design is between the curved trailing edge of the Torpedo Bomber's rudder and the straight edge of the fighter's. From above, notice that the wings of the larger 96 are parallel and very slender. This makes them appear much slimmer than the staggered wings of the 95. The roughly rectangular tail of the 96 contrasts with the sharply angular tail on the 95. The 3 crew positions can be easily seen in this view. Our smaller Navy scout bomber, Curtiss SBC4, can be compared with the Jap torpedo bomber in design and function. This type of aircraft is one of the few biplanes we now have in service as a bomber. From this angle, 2 major differences are easily seen. The Torpedo Bomber 96 has longer wings and fixed landing gears. The entire appearance of the Jap 96 is not as compact as our SBC4. This side view shows obvious differences in fuselage length, landing gear, wing bracing, and cockpit arrangement. From above, notice that the wings on the Torpedo Bomber 96 are not staggered, nor does it have a swept-back top wing as is the case on our smaller scout bomber. Also, the cockpits on the Japanese airplane are placed farther forward than on our airplane. The bird-like tail on the SBC4 differs from the nearly rectangular tail of the Jap torpedo bomber. The armament on this torpedo bomber is not definitely known. One movable gun is in the rear cockpit. While all of this type shot down so far have had only 2 synchronized guns firing forward, the Japs are experimenting with heavier armament. As its name implies, this Japanese airplane can carry a load of bombs or a torpedo on the underside of the fuselage. The 96 has an endurance of from 6 to 8 hours and a maximum ceiling of about 25,000 feet. From these silhouettes of Jap and U.S. fighters and bombers, can you pick out the enemy airplanes? Remember the important features of the Torpedo Bomber 96 and the Fighter 95. Note again the motor cowlings, wings, cockpit arrangement, tail patterns, and landing gears. Both the Japanese Army and Navy have many biplanes in service. Whether large or small, operating from land bases or carriers, they are old-type airplanes and should be easily recognized even from a distance. Watch for double wings over the Pacific.